And we're live. All right, welcome to 5 Minute Friday. I'm Neil, a Startup TNT's lead here in Calgary, and I have an awesome Calgary founder here with me today named Richard Campbell of 10 Adventures. Just before we get started, a quick reminder to those that are watching that our Summit 6 finale is coming up quick. November 17th, we're going to be live with investment decisions in Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, and Regina. So come on down. You can find the details on our website. And yeah, so Richard, take a minute and introduce yourself and 10 Adventures and how we know each other.
Yeah, great to see you again, Neil, and excited to hear about the next investment summit because we just raised money at your last investment summit, which was a super fun process. And I think I was involved in the first summit when Zach came down to Calgary right at the start of the pandemic. And as someone who's been in the tech community for a while, I really love what you guys are doing to bring founders and investors and just build this community, because that's how we're going to be successful as a tech hub is building these communities where people have a reason to get together. So I love what Startup TNT is about and how you guys are impacting our community. In terms of myself, founder of 10 Adventures. Really, our mission is to help people explore the world under their own power with active and adventure travel. And this is really important because if you think, all of our memories, or almost all of our memories, the photos on our walls are us on holidays, with people we care about. And in addition to that, being outdoors has all these health benefits, whether or not it's physical health or mental health. And so at 10 Adventures, what we're trying to do is just help people have more of these experiences, get the benefits of the outdoors, build their relationships. And the core of what we do is we help people book private multi-day active and adventure travel in over 80 countries. So, make it easy to go and explore the world, understand new cultures, build relationships with your loved ones. It's, the most rewarding thing I can do, just, hearing from customers, almost every day who've just had this incredible experience, especially after the pandemic.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, I think we're going to get into that last little point here shortly. But speaking of traveling, so you just got back from a trip abroad there, Richard. Where did you go and what were you doing there?
Yeah, like how great is it to be able to explore the world again?
Mhm.
I went over to Germany and Switzerland. I kind of had two events that just kind of came up that were side by side. So it was, making the most of a trip overseas. The first event was the biggest startup event in the German-speaking world. So it's called Bits and Pretzels, and there was pretzels like everywhere.
I
I've
love
never eaten
pretzels.
more. I must have had 20 pretzels. And 10 Adventures was one of the 100 startups selected to pitch. And so it's really interesting to pitch to a totally different investor set. And it was also great just to meet other people in the German tech scene, which, similar to the Canadian one, the Alberta one, but, there are definitely some differences. We got to meet lots of other tech founders and also some investors. And I know specifically from Germany, there have been some really big travel tech successes as well as for other parts of Europe. And so there is, definitely an evolved travel tech investor scene there. But what I think is really cool about Bits and Pretzels is the final day actually takes place at Oktoberfest. And so when I was down there, we had some big time, super successful founders with, raised $100 million or, are, doing 100 million a year in revenue and, big investors. And you're just around this little table with them and six other startup founders. And I just thought this is something, Zach, or you would love. You have this event where it's like super social. Now it was at like 8 a.m, so drinking a liter of beer for me, that was I had the de-alkalized version and it wasn't the best experience.
Yeah.
The Germans were slugging back liters of beer much easier. But I thought this is really kind of ties into this idea of building community, doing stuff together that Startup TNT does really well. So next time I see Zach, I'm going to mention that because I think he would
Yeah, absolutely.
maybe there's something you can combine with Stampede or, something like that. But it was, just a really great event and just, seeing a different scene. The second event was the Adventure Travel World Summit. So it was the first in-person summit since 2019. And what this does is it brings in about 1,000 business owners, tech companies, and government officials from around the world, brings them all together for, learning, networking, doing business. And in our case, we connected to a bunch of suppliers we'd never met because we'd done our, business, we'd done our deal online during the pandemic. We also met lots of great new partners we can work with, and also tons of media are there as well. So worked with that. The best part of this event is it's the Adventure Travel World Summit, and they really walk the walk. So before the event, they have these pre-summit adventures put on by the Swiss Tourism Board. I got to go on one of them where they bring together some founders and media people, and we spent 4 days trekking the Swiss Alps. And
Oh,
so just like
wow.
a great, just it fits in so well. Like, we weren't there just to sit in an auditorium and hear presentations. It was about getting out and exploring the place we were in, understanding the culture. So
That's awesome.
just like a jam-packed 2 weeks of kind of nonstop, nonstop stuff, but came back with already a few deals we've done. So super, super valuable to do that.
Totally. Well, good for you. That ticks a few boxes, right? Like, not only do you get to brand 10 adventures to a bunch of folks that you wouldn't otherwise, but you also get to go trek in the Swiss Alps. And yeah, that sounds like a great way to spend a few weeks for sure.
Yeah, I thought it'd be relaxing. I remember, my wife said,
Mhm.
"Oh, it must be so nice to be on your own."
Yeah.
But the way this was structured, it was like kind of like nonstop every day. And um, like I felt like I needed a vacation after it because it was just like kind of nonstop, meeting hundreds of different people and talking about their business and your
Yeah.
business.
That's
But
awesome.
super, super efficient. Like, you never get this opportunity to have so many, you know, calls, direct discussions with, potential partners all, kind of back to back to back.
Totally. Well, you mentioned COVID and the adventure travel not happening since 2019 a few times already. So I can just imagine how tough it is to run a travel company during the midst of COVID. So do you want to walk us through like how did 10 Adventures navigate the last couple of years during COVID and all right, like as we're coming out of it, things are still changing rapidly and adjusting. Like how do you guys deal with that and what are you thinking looking forward?
Yeah. So, I've asked lots of people, was there any industry hit as hard as travel by the pandemic? And I don't think so, because it
Mhm.
really stopped travel all over the world. Even now, I know the last survey, even Canadian travel is still below pre-pandemic levels. There's countries that are just opening their borders now. So, COVID was a disaster for travel. In our case, we just launched our marketplace in August of 2019. We were seeing these great growth numbers. We were down in the Bay Area, literally as the pandemic was unfolding, talking to investors, and then just bam, everything stopped. Growing up in Calgary, working in tech and energy my entire career, this isn't the first kind of massive bust I'd been through. And I actually think kind of my background and just being a Calgarian gave 10 Adventures a huge advantage compared to our competitors, because I fundamentally knew that, like, when bad things happen, eventually good things happen. So I knew that, yeah, we're in this huge bust, but eventually there's going to be a huge boom. And I'd seen firsthand the companies that prepared during the bad times succeed the most in the good times. And so while our competitors were doing, YouTube videos of travel and doing all this very pandemic specific work, we were my focus and our team's focus was, how do we scale our company? So coming out of the pandemic, we're a legitimate company. We went into the pandemic with a handful of partners and a dozen tours. We came out with partners in 80 countries, over 1,000 different tours. We'd grown our user base significantly. We'd launched an app. We relaunched our website. So we did all this stuff. So we're a much more compelling business now, than we were then. What I wasn't prepared for is, a war in Ukraine impacting energy prices, the different response in some countries in terms of opening travel, and then also just what people's willingness to travel has been. So we've seen over
Mhm.
90% of customers booking in Western Europe. And so people, even though the pandemic's over, they're still, they want to go to places they perceive as safer than others.
Mhm.
Western Europe, you understand what the response in healthcare was. So we're just seeing customers start to look at going to Africa, Asia, South America. So what we're dealing with now is the fact that, yeah, how do people, we almost had over tourism in Europe and under tourism everywhere else. Also, people had a bucket list trip in mind. So these,
Mhm.
famous bucket list trips of Torres del Paine in Patagonia, the Tour de Mont Blanc in the French Alps, some treks, the Lagavulin trek in Iceland, other things like that. Everyone had a bucket list trip they wanted to do. And so, all those were sold out last summer. And so trying to
Mhm.
help people find a secondary or tertiary trip they can do when their bucket list trip was sold out, those are the kind of challenges we're facing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good for you because yeah, that sounds like a really tough proposition to grow a travel company during the midst of a global pandemic that's impacted the travel industry so much. So I know we're at 10 minutes here already almost, but I do got one final question and we're going to wrap it up. So speaking of bucket lists, what is Richard's bucket list destination and how would you use 10 adventures to plan or book that trip?
I love this question. Everyone asks my favorite trip in the past, and it's like,
Mhm.
that's the hardest question to answer. But bucket list, what do we want to do? We're actually planning a trip to Peru. In the Calgary school system, they talk about Peru. And so our kids are like totally into Peru. They know the culture, the food, all these things. So they want to go to Machu Picchu and the Amazon. So two kind of different trips. So in the old days, you kind of had two options. You could either book onto group trips, which, kind of suck. You don't get any control of where you go, what you see, or you could plan it all yourself, which is a ton of work. You end up sending money, wiring money to somebody in some different country. You don't know if they're going to be there. You don't know if they're any good. Our goal at 10 Adventures is to take away all the work, take away all the risk, and give you a custom trip that's exactly what you need. So the way I start is actually just go on and look at the trips we have on our site. So I can look at all the trips in Peru, or I can look at different destinations like Cusco, Machu Picchu, or Amazon. Once I find a couple trips I like, I can call, chat, or email one of our adventure specialists and say, hey, I'm thinking of these trips. What do you think? How would you put this all together? They'll ask some questions, if I want any changes, the price point, the length, all those things to kind of customize it just what I want. In my case, I also want to go to Rainbow Mountain and Lake Titicaca, Isla del Sol, because those are just two cool experiences. I've never been to Rainbow Mountain, but I've been to Lake Titicaca. That I want my kids to go. And so, they would work with local suppliers to build a comprehensive itinerary that would, in my case, start at the Cusco airport and end at the Cusco airport, maybe end in Iquitos down in the Amazon. And basically day by day say, here's exactly what's happening. And let me know, understand, is it private? Is it shared? Customize it exactly what I want, but basically say, here's the price and here's a detailed itinerary. From that point, I can request changes or I can just book it. And so really my investment of time is, finding an itinerary and sending an email is the easiest. So it's, goes from being 20 or 30 hours down to a few minutes. And then the price, because it's all booked with local tour operators, it's super economical. So the price is about the price of booking with like a Western big tour operator that's running group adventures. So that's what we're looking for next summer. So next June or July, hopefully we'll be in Peru on the Inca Trail, and then exploring other great parts of, what is just a fantastic country.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds amazing. My wife did that trip and did Machu Picchu and the Rainbow Mountains here a couple of years ago, and she loved it. I had to stay home and work, but yeah, that's on my bucket list too. So, with that being said, thanks, Richard. This was super great to catch up. We love what you guys are doing at 10 Adventures, and thanks for making time for us today.
Excellent. Thanks, Neil, and looking forward to seeing you at the next Pitch Summit on November 17th.
November 17th. That's right. Awesome. Thanks, Richard.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.